Yeah, so my name is Ola, and this is Sofi, and we work for a NGO in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Yes, the statistics this morning was wrong. We were from the other part of the world. We work for an NGO that is quite new called Centro de Autonomia Digital, and we basically main purpose is to work on pets, actually building them in real life. So this is definitely a follow-up, a sequel to the talk from Tuesday about taking some of the advances in deniable authenticated key exchanges and improving the OTR protocol.
Okay, so the first thing, can you hear me clearly and loud? Okay, great. Okay, so one of the first things that we wanted to talk about into this talk that we are having is to give an overview of what OTR is, just in case someone in the audience doesn't know what OTR is, which I assume that most of the people here know. But if you don't know and you want to know, right now is your time. Okay, so what is OTR? OTR stands for off the record, and it's a cryptographic protocol that is used for secure messaging in general. It was first proposed in a paper, the paper that is quoted on the slide, that was made by at least two people that are right now in the audience, which is Ian Goldberg, Nikita Borisov, and also Eric Weaver. Okay, so where does the idea of OTR comes from? The idea of OTR comes from an idea from investigative journalism. In investigative journalism, you have this concept of off the record. And what does this mean? By an example is, for example, if I'm a source that wants to show some confidential information of a company that I work for, and I want to go and talk to a journalist about that so they can publish an article around this, I will probably say to the journalist, hey, I want to keep this, the fact that I talked to you about this information, I want to keep it off the record because maybe I will have some kind of legal trouble, or maybe I will get fired from my work if they found out that I was the person who actually disclosed this information. And the journalist will go ahead and say, yes, we will keep this off the record. And when they publish the story, there's no link that says that I, as the source of information, actually was the person who leaked this information. And this property is often defined as the deniability that I have because I can deny having actually said that information. And we wanted to also have on the digital world because what actually happens is in that real-world conversations of the real world, we often have this property. Why we have this property? For example, if I'm talking with someone in the real world and this person later says, oh, Sophie, go ahead and said this information in our conversation, I can go and say, no, I didn't say that. I can deny having said that information because no one else can actually prove that I said this into this conversation. And actually, no one can really hear what's been talking about in a real-world conversation. No one really knows what has been said. No one really knows who participated into this conversation. No one really knows if this conversation actually took place. But we know that in the digital world, this really sometimes doesn't happen because we have traces that this conversation actually took place between two participants and that some information was exchanged between them. If they're using encryption in this digital conversation, we at least don't know the exact contents of the conversation, but if they don't use encryption, we even know what the conversation was about. So OTR stands there for providing secure communication, for providing perfect forward secrecy, for providing deniability properties, so we can have conversations as in the real world. There has been several versions of the OTR protocol, 3 versions, and right now we're presenting version 4.
Right, so when we started working on OTR version 4, there were a lot of different things that we wanted to achieve. We started out thinking very small in terms of, it would be nice to have elliptic curves and maybe changing some of the domain parameters a little bit. But then, of course, Nick came and he created some very interesting new AKAs, and he kept improving them. So we've actually been working on this for a while, and every time we thought we were getting close, we got a paper from Ian and Nick about okay, so we changed a few things, and now it's even more cool. And it's very tempting to keep doing this process, but now hopefully we think that we are at the coolest level possible with these stakes.
Optimization.
Exactly. Yeah, so in terms of the features that we are interested in, deniability is of course the biggest one here. OTR, like Sophie was talking about, the whole idea of OTR is that we want the same kind of deniability that we experience in the real world. And I'm sure that we might come back to this during the discussion later, whether deniability is valuable or all this stuff. Our position is that deniability should be the default, and that we should justify why we want to go away from deniability, not why we want to have deniability, at least as long as deniability doesn't cost us too much. Now, there are many different types of deniability we are interested in, and when it comes to OTR version 4, the 4 types of deniability we are focusing on is participation deniability, as in we want it to be impossible to produce a proof to someone else that we actually had the conversation. Message deniability, which is that one party cannot produce a proof that something specific was said. Online deniability and offline deniability. And online deniability was covered during Nick's talk, and offline deniability is what has been traditionally called deniability without any qualifier. Privacy, of course, we're at pets. I guess this is pretty obvious. We also want to make sure that OTR version 4 has as good forwards, backwards, future, and yeah. Damn it, I put in the perfect. I don't want the perfect in there because that term is interesting. But yeah, future, forwards, and backwards, and yeah. I was proposing we need a new Back to the Future for a secrecy model as well, but no one is taking me up on that yet. We also want to change the security level because at the end of the day, OTR version 3 is roughly at the level of 80 bits of security level, and that's starting to feel very uncomfortable today. If you're thinking about what causes that, that's actually the DSA, the DSA, which uses 1024-bit keys, which actually is not really a comfortable security level anymore. And of course, the cryptographic primitives that are used are all kind of a little bit old, the DSA and old-style Diffie-Hellman and so on. And yeah, we also, at the end of it, when we decided that we want elliptic curves, we're going to come back to a few more of the choices in a second, but we also decided that we did want to have some classic Diffie-Hellman built in as well in order to protect against a possibility of quantum computers breaking elliptic curves significantly faster than classic Diffie-Hellman because of the difference in key sizes. And yeah, the final point here is we want elliptic curves. Because of speed, because of security levels, and all these different features.
Okay, another thing that we talked a lot about when we were developing the specification of OTR was thinking about the new communication models that there are. Previously, the previous versions of OTR had only in order network model, and right now we're thinking that we should have both network models, in order and out of order, and we should also support online and offline messaging, because the truth is, in the real world, we most of the time communicate not only when both parties are online, but also when parties are offline. So now we also have support of that in OTR before. We also want different modes in which the specification of OTR can be implemented, and this is something that we aim because implementers sometimes have a different scenario in mind from which was different from the one that was specified when you wrote the protocol. So for example, let's take the example of OTR before. If, for example, an implementer only wants to implement OTR before interactively, they can go ahead and see the guidelines for implementing this interactively. If they want to implement this so it's compatible to OTR v3, they also have the guidelines for doing so. And we also don't want to trust servers. Why? Because we want that the security properties that we provide with OTR before work by themselves, not because we have to trust a server or because we have to trust that it goes well or we have to trust something else. We want that they go well, even if the server is untrusted.
Just to mention one additional point here. This puts us in a slightly awkward position, as we will see a little bit later, because we do want to support offline conversations. At the same time, we don't want to trust servers. So OTR version 4 does have an optional server component in order to support offline communication, but we've tried to minimize the trust, and in fact, this server is completely untrusted. And the only kind of attack that should be possible from it is denial of service, which is possible in several other scenarios anyway. So this trust in the server to not denial of services is kind of the minimal that we could find that still matches these communication models.
Okay, and just in case you were wondering also, well, all of these changes and security properties are stated. We have a protocol on GitHub where you can read it. If you have forgotten by right now which security properties we were talking about, you can go ahead and read them. And it basically looks like this.
Right,
okay.
So let's go through a few specific examples here, just to be specific. First of all, we ended up using two different of the deniable authenticated key exchanges from Nick's paper, DXZ and XADH. And we use these instead of the very common these days, X3DH AKE that Signal uses, or the Sigma model that OTR version 3 uses. It's not exactly Sigma, but it's close enough. Now, the reason for this, the primary reason that we chose these two DAKes is because they give us online deniability. They're significantly stronger, and they're also proven in the random oracle model. And we ended up with two different DAKes because one of them gives us slightly stronger deniability properties if both participants are online at the same time. That's when we use DXZ. If one of the parties is offline, we use XCDH. And the reason for this is because XADH only gives you online deniability to one of the parties, while DXZ gives online deniability to both parties. And this is also the reason why this idea of modes of implementation is important, because in some cases, under some circumstances and for some implementations, it might not be acceptable to trade off the online deniability of one of the parties by supporting offline messaging. On the other hand, there were several other choices for offline messaging where, for us, XADH was the best trade-off in terms of speed and security properties. We've also chosen not to go with the standard Bernstein using ED25519 as our curve of choice. Instead, we're using Mike Hamburg's Goldilocks curve, or also known as ED448. For us, we found that ED448 gives us a little bit more latitude when it comes to the security level. It has a very comfortable 224 bits level, and we felt when it comes to the question of security properties for a primarily human interactive protocol, adding a few bits to the security level doesn't really make that much of a difference when we're talking about the kinds of speeds that you have to interact with as the end user. We also, and this is what I mentioned before, we do have in the ratchet, and these are coming in random order in my head, it feels like. We have a ratchet, and in that ratchet, the main ratcheting is done using the 448 Goldilocks curve. However, we are also mixing in the Diffie-Hellman 3072-bit prime Diffie-Hellman exchange every third ratchet in order to do this kind of countermeasure against fast quantum attacks. We have changed the main hashes to shake and the main symmetric algorithm to xsalsa20. Shake, it's quite simple. It's because we want the 256 level hash, and shake is what's used in ED448 implementations by standard. xsalsa20 is a little bit more of an interesting choice. This one is because it's a fast symmetric cipher that also has a 256-bit block size, which matches our other security parameter choices. Yes, and of course, the old OTR version 3 and earlier was one of the earlier protocols that implemented a ratcheting algorithm. This was later taken on in TextSecure and Signal to create the double ratchet algorithm. We have adopted the double ratchet algorithm roughly more or less the same as how Signal's implementing it. There is a significant difference in how the double ratcheting is initialized, where Signal uses the ephemeral keys exchanged during the AKE in order to initialize the double ratchet. This is something that we don't feel comfortable doing, and we're currently figuring out exactly what the right approach is, looking deeply at Nick's proof and discussing this back and forth. For us to be able to have full participation deniability, we have introduced something called client profiles. Client profiles are also necessary for us to support offline messaging And the client profiles is one of the pieces that we publish to this pre-key server that we talked about earlier. The client profile is also necessary in order to make it possible for someone to create their first key and publish it somewhere, so that the first time it's used in an ache, it's not actually a proof that a participation that someone participated somewhere. Yeah, non-interactive. This ended up being based on the XADH and having a pre-key server that provides for pre-key, both a shared pre-key and also single pre-key messages that make it possible to initiate a conversation with someone that is offline. We did adopt the design where we have both a shared pre-key and a unique pre-key, an ephemeral pre-key, in order to stop the deniability attacks that Nick was talking about against the older version of the, is that the 3DH or XDH? XDH, sorry. We also provide a toolkit, and the toolkit allows you to do all the forging operations. So the OTR version 4 specification contains operations for forging. We specify that an implementation should actually provide all these forging capabilities to the end user, so that the deniability is not just a theoretical concept that someone could implement, it's something that is actually there in the code base. Just like with OTR version 3, all of the forging that we talked about, you can actually do on your own with tools that we provide. Now, there are two main limitations that you can see here. The first one is that we are not putting in any post-quantum algorithms yet. The reasoning for this is basically we feel that it's not clear which algorithms there is a consensus on, and there is also a lack of good implementations that we feel are stable enough that we can base our specification on them. The idea behind OTR version 4 is that we create a specification that makes it easy to upgrade. So when the time comes around for us to put in a post-quantum algorithm, we should be able to flip the switch, upgrade to version 5, make very small changes to the spec, and that should be it. So we've been trying quite carefully to make the spec as easy as possible to upgrade going forward, and this is also true for the implementation. Finally, group chats. We felt like the alternatives when it comes to group chats were quite complicated. At the same time, especially when we come to group chat that fulfill the same security properties or similar security properties that we are interested in for one-to-one or peer-to-peer conversations inside of OTR, we felt that adding any of those kind of group chat protocols right now would have complicated the protocol to a significant degree, and would also have added an element of insecurity in the protocol as well. So our idea is that once something nice comes out that fulfills the same or similar properties, this should come out as a sibling protocol, a complementary protocol, instead of being part of the same protocol.
Okay, so how does OTR look like? We basically stay with the same architecture or this architectural design that OTR v3 already had, but we change the cryptography primitives that we use in it. So basically, at the start of OTR, as we all know, we will have an advertisement of what version you are supporting, and if you support OTR, and if the other party actually supports the version that you are advertising and supports OTR, then you will start the OTR protocol in a secure messaging way. After that, you can verify the fingerprints of the party by doing a manual fingerprint verification, for example. Then the deniable authenticated key exchange starts, and why this starts? Because we need to generate a shared secret in order to start the double ratchet algorithm. And we also need to really know that we're talking with the participant that we want to talk, but no one else should be able to know that you're talking exactly to that person. Only the people that are having the conversation and that are doing the take are the people that knows that you are talking to the right person, but anybody outside doesn't know this fact. After that, of course, we're going to start the conversation, and the conversation gets encrypted with the double ratchet algorithm, which generates a message key per message. And you can also have TLVs, which is typelet values, which advertise other functionalities that you can have in the OTR protocol. And if you want to finish the conversation in OTR, you just send a finish and you finish.
Just the TLVs contain the same functionality as older OTR, so we support the extra symmetric key, we support SMP, the Socialist Millionaire protocol, using the same primitives that we've chosen in the rest of the protocol.
Okay, now for the...
Do we have a question, Ian?
Yeah, go back one.
Okay, sorry.
So verification, what's that step?
It can be, for example, the manual fingerprint verification, if you want.
So in OTR v3 and earlier, that happens after the DAKE.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's true. Sorry. Yeah, it's after the DAKE.
Oh, it's after the
yes.
DAKE.
It's kind of like, it can also be on the side, a human interaction where people compare on paper and so on. So verification as a step is either part of the SMP or it's a human thing that isn't actually mediated by the protocol.
Okay. So, good.
Okay, now for what we wanted to show you, most important. We have a real-world implementation, a production-ready implementation that has been written in C. We have the library, we have also the implementation of the Prigi server in Golang, we have the implementation of the Pidgin plugin. Why we think it's important to have an implementation of a protocol? Because oftentimes when you do some research, you have an implementation that sometimes doesn't run on one operating system, it doesn't compile on all compilers, or it doesn't run on all. And we wanted to provide, with a real-world protocol, we wanted to provide a real-world implementation that could work on most of the operating systems, most of the compilers, and that can just run when an implementer wants to run. And this is one of the insights that we have in OTR before. And we also wanted to provide the implementers an example of how you can implement this by doing, for example, a plugin for a real-world chat client as Pidgin. Because we're working in C, I'm sorry.
So we only have a limited amount of times, and we want to leave
sorry.
some time for questions. So I'll give you like 1 minute, and then we'll take
because we're working in C, we had a lot of memory things that we wanted to check, so we have a lot of checkers. If you want to check them out, we have the protocols in GitHub. You can check them all out. They are part of the security and privacy community. If you want to find an attack in OTR before, go ahead and find it so we can improve the protocol. If you want to read something around it or one of the decisions of why we make this protocol, it's there. Go ahead and read it. If you want to collaborate implementing this, please let us know. The protocol is as yours as ours. As it is yours, so go ahead.
Yeah, and part of the specification is also what we call what's called ADRs, architectural decision records, and that's for all the major decisions we've made. We've also documented the reasoning behind the decisions, and those are documented outside of the specification, but they're part of the repository.
Okay, thanks. So questions, I guess.
In North Syria, there's a Kurdish YPG, who are fighting against ISIS, who went and captured and made genocide and all this thing. And all of the people in that I know from that movement that I communicate with, they can't use Pidgin. I tried, like Jabber, XMPP, Pidgin. It's far too complicated. All of them use Signal. And my worry is that all of this research kind of just end up becoming like a thing that we use. And it's not just this product, it's in general.
So yes, that's completely true, and that's a significant problem. When it comes to Pidgin, one of our plans going forward as part of the plugin work, we are going to do some usability work on the plugin once we have the basic functionality working. Our team is also behind another instant messaging client called Koyim, which is built to be from the ground up, have the right security choices so that you don't have to actually make any choices. It should be as secure as possible coming out, and we are also going to support OTR version 4 in this. And the idea is for these kind of situations that would be the kind of client that you can give people. It should just start up and work.
But we should also remember that OTR is not linked to any messaging protocol. If you want and you are implemented and you want to implement OTR version 4 in another context or with another client, you can go ahead because the protocol is yours to go and implement. So if you feel you need OTR for mobile phones and you want to do an application for that, you can have that because that's the idea of OTR that works out of the box in every messaging protocol that you have.
Okay, thanks for working on this, and also thanks for making a toolkit for forging deniability and messaging. It's really a neat idea because we don't have this. So my concern, I guess, is like the question is the main drawback of OTR, previous versions of OTR, is a usability concern. Because it's like a text protocol, text-based protocol that runs over everything, and most of the users end up at like not encrypting their messages at all. So like, how do you see? As I can see, you still using this kind of, you still using this kind of text format for like bridging all the XMPP running over everything. But yeah, how do you get to the point when you encrypt all the messages by default without even letting users know that they have to do something? So like, how do you see usability perspective of OTR, and like how are you going to deal with it? Thanks.
That's a very broad and big question. I agree with you that that's what we really want. We want as much of this as possible to not be in the face of the user. But our work here is first and foremost to make it possible to actually have a good deniable messaging protocol for implementers to build those kind of systems on top of.
Yeah, so also usability sometimes is linked with the kind of client that you are working on. So if the client has, for example, its own usability properties, sometimes you plug OTR on that usability properties that this client has. That said, I think we still have a lot of work that we can do in OTR for usability matters. And this is something that I recommend everybody here that are researchers. If you want to research around how to do a better usability in OTR before, you can go ahead and do for that. Because right now we're just wrapping up all of the OTR work as a protocol, as an implementation. The next step, logically, will be to start working in usability. So we will take those concerns in the usability work.
Yeah, just okay. Thanks. The quick note is: do you like expect some kind of infrastructure for this messaging, like some kind of messaging service that will be like by default? For example, like Signal. Like, people don't have to think about XMPP, about other transport, and like how to plug these things together. And do you expect this kind of infrastructure?
So OTR is designed by default to be usable on any network protocol, and that is a very careful choice. We don't want to lock it to a specific implementation, and we definitely don't want to lock it to a centralized implementation like Signal. OTR has been a little bit associated with XMPP, but it does run on anything. But at the end of the day, this is also kind of, at the end of the day, this is something that people higher up in the stack needs to make the decision. We're making it as easy as possible to use OTR on any of those situations, but we also don't have the resources to recreate all the clients and infrastructure necessary on top of that. That might be something for the future. I would love to do that, but that's not something that we can tackle in the OTR work itself.
But the idea is the possibility, you have the possibility of doing that if you want, because OTR is not linked, OTR before and OTR in general is not linked to anything. You can have it, you can take it and implement it in what you want.
Okay, thanks.
So just great work. I hope we look forward to seeing Nick's report and your report on the MLS mailing list, because we've had this problem where everyone got stuck with Signal for a while, which didn't have an open standard, was centralized, and it's just been a mess. Looks like we're finally sorting that out. It would be a bit sad if the open source community went one way and everyone else went another way, when we finally might have the chance to have like a standardized good group messaging protocol. But however, in terms of something completely different, most of the usability failures for deniability have actually not been on the protocol level, and it was a real big failure in OTR, as came out during the Chelsea and Lamo's work, which is that at least early versions of Pigeon, at least when I was using them, had this horrible feature where they would like basically keep your fully deniable, cryptographically deniable transcript like on your client device by default. And I think so even if it's sort of indent encrypted and the sort of the cryptography is deniable, essentially if everyone's walking around with actual transcripts, that's a terrible thing, because most people didn't even know those transcripts were turned on. They were assuming they were having these like super high secret conversations, and then those transcripts would be seized. You see the same phenomenon with Signal, where someone turns on disappearing messages, but it really only works on one way effectively. So the old messages, you can't force deletions of previous messages on God knows whose devices. So I was wondering if you guys have any thoughts on like this sort of usability and making deniability and things that most ordinary end users would kind of associate with deniability, such as no transcripts, available and usable to high-risk users.
So there are a few different points to unpack there. The first one is that when it comes to the Lamo Manning case, of course, this was not an accident. Adrian Lamo kept transcripts on purpose. This was not something that happened by chance. This is on purpose, and it was maliciously done. Secondly, you have the question that comes back to, from a judicial standpoint, should a text file that has no cryptographic authentication associated with it actually serve as evidence? I mean, I personally don't believe that makes sense, but on the other hand, we are in a society right now where most of the judicial system does think that this makes sense. My hope is that will change, and we're trying to lay the groundwork for a world where that's possible by having these kind of protocols where actually there is no such cryptographic proof, in contrast to, for example, PGP. And then the final part of this is, I do think that clients and usability of clients do have a responsibility. And once again, this is where, if you look at, for example, Tails, when you open Tails, you have a pigeon that has been heavily customized. It does not save logs by default. It tells you that it's not saving logs. And it's made a lot of different choices. It puts each one of your circuits to a different Tor circuits by using the username password trick on SOX5, and it does a bunch of these other things. The problem is that Pigeon, when you download it by default, most people will download it and run it on their Windows machine, and then you will have to remember to do all these like 20 or 30 steps. And that was one of the motivating factors of, I was teaching security and operational security to groups of people, and I kind of got tired of teaching them all the 20 steps they had to take to actually make Pigeon work in a reasonably secure way. And this was one of the motivations, once again, behind our chat client, Koyen. And so we, as a group, are very interested in this problem. It is a problem that has to be at the client side, because as you say, this is not really related to the protocol itself.
For questions. If you want to talk to Ola and Sofia, you can do so during the ice cream break, but let's first thank the speakers again.